What's going on, guys? Linus here. If you have not been keeping up with the latest news, you will be delighted to hear that Civilization 6 has been announced 2 days ago. It is on the way, it is being made, and it's coming out for PC on October 21st, 2016, later this year, which is extremely awesome. Now, they also released a trailer that I am going to be showing you guys, and I want to talk about some aspects of this trailer. Now, the audio will be somewhat muted because if I leave the audio in, I'm just going to ruin the trailer for you guys. But there will be a link to the trailer itself in the description, as well as links to all sources I'm using for this video. So without further ado, let's jump into the trailer and take a look at what they decided to show us. Alright, so here at the very start of the trailer, we instantly see some Egyptian hieroglyphs, or however you're supposed to pronounce that word, which not only, of course it's very relevant in terms of civilization and how, written word came to be, but it might actually tell us something about a civilization that will be in the game from the start.
We are the explorers.
Not only that, but the following screen, or scene, I guess, basically, definitely, supports that view. Seeing as we see a desert, we see a bunch of pyramids, we see 3 pyramids in fact, and we see a sphinx. I mean, this is Egypt, we know that.
The inventors. The architects.
Next up, we see the Great Wall of China. Now, this doesn't necessarily confirm that China will be in the game from the start, but, it might. Then again, it could just be a reference to the Great Wall of China being in the game as a wonder again. It could mean all sorts of things, but at least they're showing it and we know that it most likely will be in the game, and that I'd say we can assume that China will be in the game as well.
Architects of change.
Then there's the Colosseum. Again, the Colosseum is just a building in the game. It doesn't necessarily confirm that the Romans will be in the game or anything like that. But then again, the Romans are one of the most influential civilizations in history, and I absolutely would be extremely surprised if they were not in the game. I would assume that they will be in the game from the start.
The builders.
The Forbidden Palace, again, another wonder that we all know and love, except if you don't love it. Of course, the Forbidden Palace is another one of those Chinese wonders, just like the Great Wall, which again, it would be a bit weird maybe even if there were several wonders that were in China in real life without a Chinese civilization. So it does support, in my idea, the view that China will be in the game from the very start. The Eiffel Tower, now I'd say at this point in the trailer they move towards more industrial times, and not necessarily any, frame means something. I mean, obviously, I would assume again that the Eiffel Tower will be in the game, but it doesn't really mean anything more than that, I believe. Now this shot's pretty interesting. We see a man working in a tower or something. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, that's not my line of work, you know what I'm saying? I don't know what's going on there. But we do see, I believe, the Chrysler building. I just Googled it. Yes, it is the Chrysler building. So maybe that means something. Maybe the Chrysler building will in some way be in the game, or again, it might not mean anything and just be used as a point to illustrate how far we've come as a civilization.
We strive. We dream. We inspire. Always towards something greater.
And then there's Gandhi, who we all know and love. Unless he's nuked you before, then you don't love him. And next to him is a little map right here, which says Ganges. For those of you not in the know, the Ganges is a river over in India, and I believe it is somewhat of a holy river. It's not even relevant to talk about that. Either way, I mean, it is safe to assume that Gandhi will be in the game as well as India, as the leader of India, again.
All the odds we defy. The risks we take.
I don't know if they're trying to tell us that Teddy Roosevelt will be the leader of the American Civ, but that would be very interesting. So I'm excited to find out who their leader will be. That's going to be interesting to see.
The Challenges we endure only make us stronger.
Now this is pretty interesting because this, what you're seeing right here, in case you didn't know, I mean, I didn't know at first when I saw it, but apparently this is the lights for the 9/11 memorial, which basically takes Civilization into very modern times, which hasn't really happened before. Or in fact, there could be a lot more modern things in this game that have happened between now and, say, Civ 4, Civ 5. I mean, society has changed a whole lot, so there could be some interesting things in this game that will play into that or illustrate it.
There's no end to our imagination.
Now, the satellite and the rocket I also find pretty interesting. Obviously, they're not going to leave space out, or, you know, the fact that science might lead to you reaching space or getting satellites or something like that. Now, it makes me wonder whether or not the science victory will still mean you go into space. Again, I don't think there's anything known about this quite yet, but it's interesting for sure.
And no limits to civilization.
So there we go, October 21st, 2016, which is about 5 months and 1 week, and we will be able to play Civilization 6 already, that quickly, yes. Very, very exciting stuff. Alright, so that was a trailer for the game, but aside from the trailer, we also have some screenshots of the game. In fact, there have been 3 screenshots that they released that are visible on the Steam page for the game as well, which instantly went live along with the trailer. And I'd like to take a look at some of these screenshots and explain what's going on in them, or attempt to explain, and just sort of analyze them one by one. Alright, so these screenshots are really quite dense, and there's a lot of information in there, so I'm going to take it somewhat slowly. To begin with, obviously the graphical style is very different from Civilization 5. For a lot of people, this was definitely something to criticize. I saw a lot of people complaining about the graphical style, how it went from somewhat realistic to somewhat more of a cartoony style. In fact, it's quite similar to the Civilization Revolution game that was on consoles. I played that on Xbox. I'm not sure what other console it was for, but it looked pretty similar to this. So a lot of people were complaining. Personally, I actually really like this style. I really dig it. That's just a matter of preference, though, so I'm just pointing it out. Yes, there will be a very big change in terms of graphical style. Now, anyway, let's dive into the screenshot and take a quick look at what is in it. So beginning with the city itself, we can see that right in the center of the screenshot, pretty much. We see a large collection of little buildings with one big building, which we can assume is the palace right there. There's no city walls. And the most interesting thing is that cities are no longer the way they used to be in Civilization 5 or 4 or any previous game, in fact. Now, I read a recent PC Gamer article on Civilization 6 that actually gives us a lot of information on the gameplay mechanics. I'm going to put that in the description. It is written by Phil Savage, and he interviewed lead designer Ed Beach for Civilization 6. Ed Beach was also responsible for the expansions for Civilization 5. So I'm personally really, really confident that Civilization 6 is in very good hands. But anyway, in the article, there are a lot of details about the gameplay that they talked about. Now, the first thing they're talking about is the fact that cities are now made up of districts. Now, what this means is that cities are no longer settled in just a single tile the way they used to be in the past, but you actually make certain tiles around it that are a part of the city. So they're not just improvements, but they are actually part of the city. So basically what they're saying is that each building type is part of a district. So for example, you have a campus tile, and that's where all your research is going. So that's where you will build certain, research buildings, like we have the library, we have the university, public school, research lab. All of that will go into that specific tile. Now in this screenshot, I think we might be seeing one of these tiles already. If you look down from the city, there's this somewhat golden roofed district, which I think might be sort of a commercial district. So that's probably where markets would go, banks, things like that. So that is a part of the city. In fact, you see some houses right next to it. That might be where merchants live or something like that. But that is the first example of one of these tiles. That was most likely a commercial district, I would say. Right next to it, we see a giant pyramid. I would assume that this is most definitely just a world wonder. Probably just the pyramids. It doesn't really look like it could be a certain tile. I mean, this is so unique looking that it must be a wonder. So this might be what the pyramids are going to look like in Civilization 6. Pretty similarly, we see over in the distance towards the sea, we see a normal looking lighthouse, and we see a very big looking lighthouse, which I would assume is a great lighthouse as well. That's another wonder right there. But what I find more interesting than those little lighthouses is this little fishing dock that we see over here, which I'm not really sure if that is a building, if that is going to be a certain tile, if you have an ocean district where you build, say, harbors, seaports, maybe they have some other fishing buildings. I'm not really sure about that, but I've seen more fishing docks in some of these screenshots, and it leads me to believe that there will be a specific tile where you build all your sea improvements, like I said, harbors, seaports, all that kind of stuff, which makes sense to me. And lastly, we do see some farms right next to the lighthouses, and I would assume that those are just tile improvements. They're probably not part of the city, seeing as there's so many of them. They don't really seem to serve any specific purpose. That's probably just farms. I mean, I don't think a granary might go there, so it could still be a part of the city, but that still remains to be seen. But right now, I would assume that they're just tile improvements. Now, in the bottom right, we see the start of a mine. We can't really see much more, but it appears to be salt or maybe silver. Again, I'm not really sure if that is going to be a part of the city, one of those tiles, or whether or not it will be a simple tile improvement. Now, the interesting thing is that in the interview, Ed Beach said that the placement of these districts, because you actually get to place them yourself, can actually grant you certain bonuses. So, for example, building a science district or a religious district next to mountains will provide you with a bonus, because the mountains are sort of a religious thing in ancient times. So you would get a bonus to your faith from that, or you could get one. And it's kind of the same with research, where you can, say, build an observatory because you're next to a mountain, or it makes it easier to study the skies. So basically, you could get a bonus to science if you make this tile next to a mountain. I mean, I don't really know much more than what has been said in this interview so far, but that is basically how these tiles will work. And I'm very interested to see how these bonuses will work, what they will entail, and how strong they're going to be, mostly. I mean, that's going to be very, very interesting to see. Now, if we look to the ocean, we can see some fishes, so it's safe to say that fishes still exist in this new world. And we also see, if we look very, very closely, over next to, between the, or basically to the north of the farm and next to the Great Lighthouse, we see some crabs in the water. So crabs are definitely a resource that will be back in the game. We also see some boats actually on one of these fishes. It's not exactly clear whether these are fishing boats or a military boat that's just sort of sitting there. But I'm assuming that you can actually work fish again, and that's probably what the dock is used for that I showed you guys earlier. Now, for the most obvious thing, the borders are purple and yellow. Maybe I should have said this at the start. But those were the colors that Egypt used, and considering the fact there are pyramids here and that they've used those colors for a while, I mean, it's pretty much Egypt, I'm guessing. Judging from this screenshot and the trailer and the wonder, I think it's safe to assume that Egypt is going to be in the game from the very start. Now, over to the left, we actually see a little bit of a border from a rival civ, which is white and blue. Now, this is a color scheme that was used by Portugal in Brave New World, so it could definitely be that Portugal is in the game from the very start again. If I had to take a guess, that's what I would say, although it could also be Greece if the color of their blue was adjusted a little bit. I mean, it could also be a new civilizations such as Israel, which is also white and blue, but for now, I would definitely say it is most likely Portugal, considering the colors. Now, another thing that I found really interesting is that we see two troops, or two units, on the screen as well. We see a group of what I will assume to be composite bowmen sitting next to the dock, and we see probably warriors or swordsmen. I'm guessing swordsmen next to the city and that commercial district that we saw earlier. Now, the swordsmen don't look very interesting. It's just the unit, but it's the composite bowman that interests me the most. Now, if you look very closely, you'll see that one of these four bowmen actually looks different from the rest. Now, this could mean any number of things. First of all, it could obviously mean that there will be more variation in the way your units look, but it could also mean something very different. But in Civilization 6, some of the combat and unit mechanics are also changed from Civilization 5. So, for example, what they've said is that you can now actually put a warrior and a settler on the same spot to get them to safety, but you can also tie them together in a way. But also all supporting equipment, so what they're saying in the article is battering rams, siege towers, anti-tank guns, and anti-air guns can all be stacked with a normal military force. There's also an article on Polygon written by Colin Campbell where they go slightly more in depth on some of the military changes, and one thing that is actually new is that you can stack 2 or 3 units together into what I assume to be one unit, which is very similar to something you could do in Civilization Revolution. And these will basically be called corps or armies. Now, this very thing might be what we're seeing with these archers here. This could be, say, 2 different groups of archers, which makes them look a little bit different, but it's clear that they're stronger. Or it might even be a great general stacked together with these archers. Again, this is all speculation. It could also just be that some units just look different now. I guess we'll find out soon enough, but I thought it was very interesting to see that one of these units looked somewhat differently. Now, I think that's pretty much everything that can be seen in this screenshot. If I missed anything, please let me know. But for now, I'm going to move on to the next screenshot. Now, this next one is very, very interesting as well. It appears to be somewhat later in the game, judging from the ships offshore. They're a lot bigger than the ships in the previous screenshots, which were pretty small, and I would assume them to be triremes, while these look more like probably frigates. Now, starting with the border, which is red and white, I think it's safe to say that Japan is most definitely in the game, not only because of the borders, but also because of these samurai that we see standing here. And these samurai basically have the same characteristic as the archers from the previous picture. They actually look different. We have 3 different kinds of samurai sitting together in one unit, which is very interesting, and I'm hoping to find more about that later. But that does, to me, prove pretty much that Japan will be in the game from the very start. Now, there are some more wonders to see here, one of which is the Oracle. I mean, this pretty much has to be the Oracle that we know and love. But this one I found much more interesting. We see a statue of a golden statue on the coast. Now, this could be just about anything. It could be a reimagining of the Colossus. It could be a new wonder, which I assume it is. But it kind of looks like a statue of Poseidon or something like that, which I find very interesting, and I am really looking forward to finding out about more wonders. But I thought it was really cool that they instantly showed us what I assume to be a new wonder on one of these screenshots. Furthermore, we see 2 cities in the very same screenshot, one on the coast and one right next to the mountain here. Now, they both seem to have a religious district. We see, let's see. See, I assume this sort of white circle to be a shrine. I would assume that this big building here is most likely a temple, and this definitely kind of looks like a pagoda. They're both built next to mountains, which definitely shows that those mountains most likely do give you a pretty good faith bonus, which is why both of his religious districts are next to these mountains. Another unit we're seeing is a bunch of crossbowmen standing next to the big new wonder that we saw. But those all appear to be the same, and they just look like a generic crossbowman, so there's really nothing more to say about that, I believe. What I did find very interesting is these units down here next to this blue district, which we'll get into later, because they appear to be some type of maybe missionary. They're holding scrolls. They just look like missionaries. They're obviously not intended for combat purposes. So that does mean that religion is definitely back in some way, shape, or form, and missionaries are most likely still a part of that whole system. Now, not only religion is back, they did state in some of these articles that trade and tourism will also be back. We don't know in what way. There's no details about that. All they really said is, they're still being very vague, is that they will be back. I'm hoping that they're going to allow people to play the games play the game on, say, E3, Gamescom, things like that. And I hope more details emerge as soon as possible, because I am extremely excited to see more about this game. But I did think it was a good thing that they immediately said, you know what, these parts of the game are back from the very start. You're going to have tourism, you're going to have religion, and you're going to have trade. Because this was the thing that did bother me with Beyond Earth, is that we had Civilization 5 with all these great expansions, and Beyond Earth basically said, yeah, we're ignoring all those parts, and instead we're just going to go to space, and that's going to be it. Anyway, another thing that I thought was quite interesting about this screenshot is that we see in both of these cities some type of obelisk. I'm not entirely sure what that does. This basically looks a lot like the monument from Civilization 5, if you look at the little picture in-game. So this could mean that a monument is just built inside of the city. It might have a different purpose. It might no longer be a cultural building. We don't know, but I did think it was very interesting. Next up, we have this blue district. Seeing as it's blue, I think it's safe to assume that it will be a scientific district, although it's not entirely clear to me what buildings we're looking at. This big blue building over here could easily be a library or a university. I'm not really sure. And seeing as we can't see all of this, I'm not entirely sure what other buildings we're looking at, so I'm really left guessing here. Now, I did find this blue district statue quite interesting. I'm not entirely sure if that is just there for aesthetics, if it serves any kind of purpose. Is it a building in-game? Again, there's just not enough information to really tell. I just thought it was interesting. If you guys have any ideas about that, make sure to let me know. And I think that's pretty much all in this Wait a minute, there's pigs over there. Look at that. So we know there's pigs in this game. At least I'm assuming they're pigs. Now, this screenshot's so small that it's almost impossible to tell. But those definitely look like pigs running around in mud. If I'm wrong, again, please let me know. But it would be cool to see pigs as not necessarily a resource, but a certain tile property, I guess. Now, this last screenshot might just be the most interesting one of them all, because it will show you not only 2 cities, but a bunch of different districts that we haven't yet seen. Again, we see the samurai, we see a pikeman, and we see some lancers or knights. I'm not entirely sure what they're supposed to be, but it does give us some more information about units that will be in the game. And again, I will assume that this is a game as Japan. Now, there are a few interesting things. First of all, we see a mine. I think for the first time, we can actually see the mine clearly without it being slightly off screen. This looks to be some sort of clay or copper mine. It's tough to say, but it is clearly a mine. And it does look like clay, which might actually tell us that there will be more new resources in this game. Next to the clay, we see what I assume will be some type of luxury resource. I'm seeing a bunch of flowers. It could be incense. It could be some type of new luxury, maybe perfume. You know, what do I know? I'm just guessing here. But I did think it looked very interesting. And it's definitely something new, or at least a new way to show an old luxury. Now, next to that luxury, we have 2 farms, and next to that is a new district, which we hadn't yet seen, which is clearly a military district. Not only because it's red, but you see a bunch of military tents, a lot of them, in fact. You see a bunch of flags. They have little fences. This is quite clearly a military camp. So this raises the question, will it train units from that camp? Will units still be trained inside of the city? I'm assuming that you actually use this camp to make your units. And this will most likely also be where the barracks go, the armory, and all things like that. But right next to the city, we have this purple district, or pink, whichever you prefer, where we can see some more interesting things. First of all, this is clearly an amphitheater. We see that. There's some dinosaur bones. There is what appears to be a garden, I'd say. And there's another building that I can't quite place, but it could be any cultural building. It could be an opera house. I mean, it's not entirely certain what that is, but this is quite clearly a cultural district, and it's right next to the city. We also see some statues right next to this building and one behind it in a very strange position. But yes, this is clearly a cultural district. Now, over at the mountains, we see another blue district. This is also clearly a science district, I would say. We get another look at what appears to be a university or library. Again, I would guess that is most likely the university, with this other small building next to it being the library. But what also interests me is the little building right next to it. We see a mill. Now, this could either be an improvement. This could be a lumber mill improvement. It could also mean that there is now a production tile. This could be where buildings go, such as the workshop, the windmill, all kinds of things could go there. this might very well be a new district, and it would make sense to me. Now, over beyond the mountains, we see yet another city, probably belonging to the same civilization, but right next to it, we see some copper. I mean, at least I think it's pretty safe to assume that that is copper. So copper is back in the game, and that's cool to see. We can also see slightly more clear the little fishes, we see the crabs, but we also see what might just be pearls right next to the lighthouse. I'm not entirely sure about that, but they're clearly not normal fish, so it might very well be something like pearls. And this is the coolest thing I've actually seen about these districts so far. If you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll actually see some brightly colored tents sitting all together. And it took me a second to figure out what that is, but I would assume it is some sort of happiness district. This might be where your circus goes, your Coliseum, all those buildings you used in Civilization 5 to boost your happiness. Those would probably go in this district, and that is most likely what that is. I mean, it's brightly colored. I mean, it just looks like a circus by itself. So that is what I would assume, and that's pretty cool to see. All right, so that's pretty much all the information I can gather from these screenshots. I mean, they're not giving us that much. I'm still very, very excited to find out more about the game. They have said some more interesting things in these articles, and if you are interested in Civilization, I would definitely recommend reading them. One of the most interesting things to me, which wasn't really shown in the screenshots, is the new sort of form of scientific research where you get boosts to your research according to certain choices that you make. Basically, what Beach said is that the way the game is played is too set in Civilization 5, and this is the thing that bothered me once I got to a higher level, is that eventually you understand the game and you keep doing these same things over and over again, where you always know that you have to prioritize science, you have to keep growing, and you basically get it, and you fall into this pattern. And what they wanted for Civilization 6 is a system that actually forced players to adapt to their surroundings, to other civilizations, and I'm very much looking forward to figuring out more about that. For example, they said that AI, the other civilizations, will be a lot more in-depth, a lot more complex. So they definitely reworked the diplomacy functions in Civilization 6. There isn't a whole lot, I think, that has been said about this, but I am looking forward to find out more about it. But the science is really interesting in that in Civilization 5, you were, for example, able to research sailing without ever seeing the ocean, or you were able to research, say, masonry without having quarries. Now, what they said about Civilization 6 is that they wanted to implement a system where, for example, if you were next to the ocean, you would get a boost to your research on maritime technologies, for example, because you actually had the opportunity to study that for yourself. Now, as an example, they also brought up masonry, where if you wanted to research it, it will just take a set amount of time. But if you actually make a quarry and your people thereby figure out how to do masonry, you get a big boost to their research. Which sounds really cool to me. It really forces you to adapt to the map, your surroundings, other people. It sounds amazing. Again, if you are at all interested in Civilization 6, I would recommend reading these articles. They are pretty full of information. They did a very good job on not only interviewing at Beach, but also giving us a lot more information, which is really cool. The links to the screenshots, the trailer, and both articles will be in the description. If you guys feel like I've left anything out, please feel free to let me know. If you have any opinion at all, let me know. Aside from that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I've never done something like this before, but I'm just extremely excited about Civilization 6. I wanted to just share some of the information with you guys and go over it. I'm assuming I missed lots and lots of stuff. Again, if I did, please let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like. Again, I never do stuff like this, but I want to see if you guys like it, so that maybe I might do more things like this in the future. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. I really appreciate your support, and I'll talk to you soon in a different video. Not this one. So, bye. And this shot from the trailer basically proves that Mona Lisa will be a playable civilization available from the very start.